Buddy, it's almost midnight on the East Coast if you're on Eastern time zone, but the NFL draft has finally come to an end, and we got a lot to talk about. Yes, Darnell Wright, as expected, went in the first round. He is the first round draft pick for Tennessee football since 2017 when Derek Barnett went to the Philadelphia Eagles. For those who don't remember, Derek Barnett had a pretty big splash his first year with the Eagles. He was a starter on the defensive line, and then he forced and recovered the fumble that secured the Eagles Super Bowl against Tom Brady, who had the greatest Super Bowl performance at the time of all time, even though it was a losing effort. Since then, Derek Barnett hasn't been the same. Darnell Wright went with the 10th pick to the Chicago Bears. He is going to be tasked with probably the most unfair situation ever. They're going to ask him to block for Justin Fields. Guys, I'm going to tell you this up front. This is not a good situation for Darnell Wright. Now, there's two factors to being drafted in the NFL. One is how high do you go, because there's guaranteed contracts and guaranteed salaries. The other is where you drafted, because where you're drafted has a huge impact on what you do, because you have to be in the right situation. Darnell Wright got drafted by the Bears. Justin Fields is a horrible quarterback. He's a horrible quarterback. I have never been a believer in him. I'm a much bigger believer in CJ Stroud, the new Ohio State quarterback who just got drafted today. I'm going to say it right now. Darnell Wright is in an impossible situation. Now, to be fair, Luke Getsy, the coach of the Bears, the offensive coordinator of the Bears, has experience coaching the college game. He worked under Joe Moorhead, funny enough, of all people, at Mississippi State. So he knows how to deal with offensive linemen who came from the spread. So that's one good situation for Darnell Wright. And Darnell Wright, in terms of raw talent, you can't top it. Darnell Wright is one of the most talented offensive linemen you could ever ask for. He's 6'6", 330, and can do backflips. Like, who can do that? And tackle is a more important position. But at the same time, Justin Fields, I'm sorry, is one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL, and he's one guy you shouldn't believe in going forward. So I would say that he should be happy about the number draft that he had, because he was at number 10, but he shouldn't be happy about where he's going to. I wouldn't trust myself with the Bears franchise. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about the funniest story of the night. Will Levis, Hendon Hooker. I'm sorry, guys, but if you've been following the NFL draft and if you've been covering college football the way Dave and I have, you can't help but find this to be hilarious. Will Levis didn't go in the first round. Now, Hendon Hooker didn't either, but to be honest, Dave and I have been talking about this for a week. Hendon Hooker was somewhat of a smokescreen, which is to say that a lot of teams we felt were overvaluing Hendon Hooker by way of using their scouts to leak things to the media so they could then hope that a team would waste a draft pick on Hendon Hooker. This is a common thing. This is a common thread. For the record, they were doing the same thing to Darnell Wright. They were actually trying to smokescreen Darnell Wright to the lower end of the draft. And he ended up going with the 10th pick, which is kind of hilarious. But the real story of the night is that they tried to smokescreen Hendon Hooker. He's going to be fine. He's going to go in the second round. But you know who else is going in the second round? Will Levis. Mel Kiper is melting down over the fact that Will Levis is going into the second round the same way Hendon Hooker is. And there's a huge reason for this. I'm sorry, it's hilarious. Dave and Josh Ward and I talked about this earlier in the day, and we're going to talk about it tomorrow. I think Will Levis's, what we think, burner account on Reddit cost him. I think he got caught. I want to be honest. I think he got caught. I don't think anybody trusts him anymore. One, he wasn't that good of a quarterback when he played last year for Kentucky. But you could have seen potential. But then you see his low intangibles. He's arrogant. He's cocky. He thinks way too highly of himself. And then he creates a burner account according to a lot of people who are suspicious about what happened with that Reddit post that had him going number one, that upped his odds of going on number one by like tenfold. There's a lot of speculation that he created that burner account himself. I think that hit a lot of NFL GMs, and they're thinking, if you're going to create the burner account yourself, we're not going to take you. So guys, even though Hendon Hooker didn't go in the first round, don't count out the fact that he might still go ahead of Will Levis, which is hilarious, by the way, given everything that's happened. Just to go to the message boards, thanks, Mr. Jones, for jumping on board. Hendon Hooker to the Titans at 41. Okay, the one issue with Hendon Hooker on the Titans, and I've been saying this for a while, Hendon Hooker's got a beautiful deep ball, which is a huge part of the play action pass, and the Titans are built on the play action pass. But Mr. Jones, what you have to understand is that another part of the Titans offense is you have to be able to hit things over the middle accurately, and Hendon Hooker still has issues throwing over the middle. Anthony Richardson is actually better throwing the ball over the middle than Hendon Hooker. We'll see how Hooker progresses. Look, he had issues with deep ball accuracy before last year, so he can develop pretty quickly. He's proven that. But I don't know if, given what the Titans are looking for, I don't know if he's the best fit for the Titans. I would, but as Mr. Jones points out, Derrick Henry was the 41st pick, and Hendon Hooker would be the 41st pick if the Titans took him. Just saying. And yes, Mr. Jones, you're right. Tom Brady was a 6th round pick. Hendon Hooker's not Tom Brady. Okay, Hendon Hooker, we all agree his ceiling is being a very, very good starting quarterback in the NFL for 10 to 15 years. But that is true. Mr. Jones does say Hooker beat the first overall pick. Bryce Young was the first overall pick to the Panthers. Well-deserved. I don't think that anybody who watched that game thought Bryce Young was better than Hendon Hooker. Or, I'm sorry, that Hendon Hooker was better than Bryce Young. Bryce Young was better than Hendon Hooker in that game. Hendon Hooker had a lot of help. He did his job. He did it great. Bryce Young was single-handedly willing that team to stay in the game. That was Bryce Young's performance against Tennessee last year was Michael Jordan's performance against the Celtics in the 86 playoffs when he scored 63 points. People forget the Bulls lost that game, but everybody remembers Michael Jordan's performance because he had no help. That was what Bryce Young did against Tennessee last year. It was that level. Man, I'm loving you, Mr. Jones. You're just coming in with all of the message board chat right now. The Northwestern guard the Titans took, you could say that was to protect Hooker. It was also to protect Ryan Tannehill. Look, the Titans were built on their offensive line and being able to run the ball and protecting quarterbacks on play actions. Hooker's not unique on that. That could be any quarterback at this point. I'm not here to knock Hooker. I think he's going to have a good, solid career in the NFL. I'm not sure the Titans are the best pick for him. But to get to it, the real story is that what we said all along is true, which is that beyond Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, there's not a lot of faith in quarterbacks. Anthony Richardson did go 4th to the Colts. Everybody thought he would go 3rd. Arizona traded their 3rd pick. People thought the Titans would trade up for that to get Will Levis, and Will Levis isn't even going in the first round. Will Levis isn't a first rounder. Anthony Richardson fell to the 4th pick. I think that this speaks a lot of volumes towards Hendon Hooker specifically. I think Hendon Hooker is in the best situation to be drafted highly in the 2nd round. Seattle maybe is going to see that Hendon Hooker's on the board still, and that's a big deal. Now, I want to go to a little bit of history real quick because Darnell Wright being drafted was kind of unprecedented for Tennessee football, even in the Fulmer era, which is, I want to go to the message board on this. When was the last offensive lineman drafted in the 1st round from Tennessee? You guys tell me. I'm not sure you guys know. I can tell you when. Now, this isn't a debate over who the best offensive lineman was. Because I think Darnell Wright, Fred White, to his credits, compared Darnell Wright to Chad Clifton. I see Chad Clifton because he can play both sides. He's an offensive tackle. Tackle's way more important than guard. So we're going to give credit to that. But who's the last offensive lineman drafted in the 1st round for the Vols? Better yet, here's a big question. Who's the second to last offensive lineman drafted in the first round for the Vols? Not sure if you guys are aware, but Tennessee was offensive line U under Philip Fulmer. They didn't necessarily have first-round draft picks from the offensive line under Philip Fulmer. They had a lot of later picks, guys like Fred Weary, Shaq Clifton, I just mentioned, Scott Wells. Those two blocked the way for the Packers to win Aaron Rodgers' only Super Bowl. Got to give him credit for that. But, okay, there is one relatively recent offensive lineman that was drafted in the first round of the NFL draft from Tennessee. The question for you guys is, who's the second most recent? And I'll give you a hint. It's a tie. And hey, how about that? Thomas Temple. Thomas Temple's right. It was Juwan James. Juwan James went in the first round. He was drafted in the first round of the 2014 NFL draft. And that was a major indictment against Butch Jones. I've talked about this for a while. Butch Jones' first year, my rule with coaches is your first year, if you aren't inheriting a total disaster, you should be able to at least have a bowl season or a winning record. Going 5-7 that first year when you had Juwan James, you had Antonio Richardson, you had Zach Fulton, that was embarrassing. Butch Jones, that should have been enough for Butch Jones to have a 6-6, 7-6 year. And he didn't. But you're right, Juwan James. Now, here's the question. Here's the real question for the message boards. Who was the most recent first-round offensive lineman taken in the draft before Juwan James? Which was a good one. I'm not knocking that. Juwan James was drafted in the first round, had a great NFL career. Who was taken before him? Mr. Jones, Trey Smith, is probably on track to have the best career of any offensive lineman that I'm about to name in the past 30 to 40 years, but he wasn't taken in the first round. He fell to the sixth round. He is the Tom Brady of offensive linemen. So the question becomes, who was the last offensive lineman before Juwan James taken in the first round of the NFL draft coming out of Tennessee? Anybody? Anybody know? Well, we're having a lot of comments on Butch Jones. Look, there's a lot to criticize about Butch Jones. I am the first to do it. He completely abandoned everything Tennessee football fans stand for. To be fair, at the time, Tennessee prided itself on being a pro-style offense. Butch Jones brought a spread, and now Tennessee brings in an air raid / spread. I call it the veer and shoot offense. So it's a little bit different, but we all trust Josh Heupel more than Butch Jones. But the question is, again, the last offensive lineman before Juwan James taken in the first round of the NFL draft. As a matter of fact, let's take this to another level. Because to be fair, Juwan James was taken with the 19th pick. The last Tennessee football offensive lineman that was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Anybody know? It was a tie. Back-to-back. 1991. Charles McRae and Anton Davis were taken with the 7th and 8th picks of the 1991 NFL draft. That's the league Darnell Wright is in with. That is the expectations that exist for Darnell Wright. Now, there was some politicking going on criticizing Darnell Wright's work ethic. Dave has talked about, there were some reporters that talked about how Darnell Wright didn't really turn it on until his senior year. Well, guys, to be fair, if you question that, Reggie White didn't turn it on until his senior year. Look at Reggie White's track record at Tennessee. He was a mediocre to above average defensive lineman until his last year when he decided, the draft is coming. I needed to step it up a game. And he did that, and then he became a Hall of Fame defensive lineman. So, to be fair, Darnell Wright could be like that. Also, that same scout that said that also said he was uncooperative. Look, you could question his work ethic. You can't question his willing to cooperate. Darnell Wright lined up at left tackle The first year Josh Heupel was there, even though he's a natural right tackle. Then he went back to right tackle after he got settled in at left tackle this past year. Give Darnell Wright all the credit in the world. And if you have any questions about that, Cooper Mays is the best leader you could ever have on an offensive line. And he has had nothing but positive things to say about Darnell Wright. He's going to be fine. And Mr. Jones brings up the point that Darnell Wright went one pick before the Titans picked. I actually think the Titans did okay. And for those who don't know, the Titans went with the offensive line too. They went with the Northwestern guard. I'm going to get his name mispronounced, but it's Peter Skrononsky. I got to be honest, I didn't follow him as much, but I know he was very highly touted. Peter Skrononsky in a guard is what the Titans need because they're still trying to build around Derrick Henry and being the typical running power run offense that they have. This actually leads to your point, Mr. Jones, that maybe they will take Hendon Hooker in the next round because if they're still focused on rebuilding this offensive line, what that really says is that they still want to have this power running attack with a quarterback that does exactly what he needs to do in the play action. You got to give a lot of credit to that. John Todd asked about Jalin Hyatt. To be fair, Jalin Hyatt, no one expected him to go in the first round. He's probably going to go in the second round. Josh Warden and I and Dave talked about that today. You can look it up. You can check out our YouTube channel. We think Jalin Hyatt might go below Cedric Tillman, mainly because Cedric Tillman has more tools to be an NFL draft prospect than Jalin Hyatt, even though Jalin Hyatt won the Biletnikoff last year. But we'll see how that goes. And Elias Gray says, I'd rather have Tillman, frankly. I'm with you. If you're comparing him to Jalin Hyatt, yeah, Cedric Tillman is a better draft pick than Jalin Hyatt. He has more raw potential. The story of the night, though, is, and by the way, toast to beer to this. Guys, I got a Natty Bow. For those of you who don't know, I am a Marylander, and Natty Bow is huge up here. How about those Orioles? Still kind of dominating right now. I got to say that I'm going to tip my beer to the NFL draft scouts, the NFL draft GMs, the NFL draft experts who realized that Will Levis was not worthy of being a first-round pick. And, John Todd, I love you. I love you, John Todd. Loser Levis. Yes. Loser Levis is perfect. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Cheers. Guys, get some Natty. Hey, Natty Bows, if you guys ever want to sponsor. Bows and O's. You got an Orioles fan here, and you got a Marylander. Love Natty Bow. But what I was going to say was, let me drink this real quick. I do have to say that I still think Hendon Hooker is not going to be drafted before Will Levis. And also, it's worth pointing out that where you're drafted doesn't matter as much as what you do. Aaron Rodgers was the laughingstock in the 2005 draft because he fell so far, and then he became a Hall of Famer. I think it's important to point out that Will Levis still has potential. I just don't trust his intangibles. And who doesn't trust Hendon Hooker's intangibles? It's among the best intangibles that you could have in college football. And Elias Gray is, man, Elias, I love you because you're right. Mel Kiper talking about Will Levis is the best remaining pick. That he says that should be tattooed at this point. You're right. He kept talking about it. Mel Kiper is the most wrong person in the NFL draft. He's the Clay Travis of NFL draft analysis, which is to say he's professionally wrong all the time. This dude believed in Jamarcus Russell. This dude was all in on Jimmy Clausen. This dude is nothing but wrong on all of his quarterbacks, okay? Skip Bayless, Mel Kiper, you put your money on Skip Bayless. And that's crazy to say, but yeah, I would trust Skip Bayless over Mel Kiper in terms of picking quarterbacks. I would say that Elias says Levis could become a good QB in the perfect situation. Could he? I guess from a skills perspective, he could. I don't trust his intangibles. He's very arrogant. I do believe, personally, that he created that fake Reddit account to prop himself up as a first round up to number 1 draft pick. I do believe that. Could he really be okay in the right situation? Like, Fred White and I talk about this, and Fred White's going to be on the show tomorrow, by the way, for those of you who want to bring that up. Fred White has educated me on the fact that Ryan Leaf was sabotaged by the Chargers because the Chargers were such an incompetent organization. I believe that. I do. I believe that. The question is, could Will Levis even overcome an organization that believes in him? It's a weird thing to say. But we do believe that if the organization put their heart and soul and weight behind Ryan Leaf, maybe he could have succeeded. Will Levis, I don't even know if he'd succeed there. I think he's very thin-skinned, very arrogant, thinks very highly of himself, was very quick to throw his teammates under the bus. But he still might get some contracts because of his raw talent. You know who Will Levis is? I'm saying it. I got it. I got my guy. Will Levis is the next Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler didn't care if he won or lost. He got his contracts and didn't care about his teammates, and that's all he cared about. Gene Dasher says he doesn't think so. It's his problems are his questionable decision-making. I mean, that's a big part of playing quarterback. I also think intangibles are also a part of it, but yeah, Will Levis' decision-making is questionable. I take that a little bit with a grain of salt. Mark Stoops usually relies on defense to win, and he put everything in Will Levis to win last year, and it created some chaos. So I'm going to give Will Levis a break on that. And Elias Gray says, I don't think he'll take the coaching. I agree with you. Will Levis isn't going to take the coaching. Mr. Jones says Will loses. I'm with you. Will loses. Will loser. And John Todd says why Eli didn't want to play for the Chargers after the Ryan Leaf experiment. John, I want you to go to our YouTube channel today. We had a take on Arch Manning and the fact that he is and Steve Sarkisian and the Manning family are leaking the fact that he's not taking NIL money until he starts. I agree with you, John. The Manning family is very meticulous to a fault, and it's worthy of criticism, honestly, the way they try to control the narrative. And that includes Peyton Manning at Tennessee, by the way. And they are very specific about where they want to be drafted when they get drafted. And that is an underrated thing that the Mannings take seriously. Just to bring it up, it's pretty clear at this point that the Jets would have taken Manning with the first pick in the 1997 NFL draft. It's also pretty well accepted that Peyton Manning didn't want to get drafted by the Jets, which probably explains why he came back for a senior season. Now, you guys can all be like, oh my gosh, Peyton Manning loves Tennessee, and he wanted to come back because he loves playing college. The Mannings don't think that way. They think very meticulously. Peyton Manning came back to Tennessee because he didn't want to play for the New York Jets. It's as simple as that. And by the way, I'm not saying that to criticize him. That's the most incompetent franchise, one of the most incompetent franchises in all of sports. They just got lucky over the past few years, and now they got Aaron Rodgers, so they might be good. But it's worth bringing up. A few other quotes. Thomas Simmel, I'm afraid Princeton Fant won't be drafted, but will find his way onto a team. I actually agree with you on that. Princeton Fant is a 6'2", 235 athletic tight end. And this day and age in the NFL and what they value with receiving tight ends, Princeton Fant is going to find a spot. He's not going to get drafted. You hate it for him because he was one of the great players for Tennessee in terms of his loyalty and his willingness to play different positions. I think he's going to be okay, though. He's the new Arian Foster, Justin Coleman, Emmanuel Mosley, undrafted free agent to succeed. Elias Gray says, do wonder if Joe Milton's intangibles overcome Kiper's system QB stuff if he has a good season. Feels like the unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Okay. So I don't think Kiper has a bias against the program. I think Kiper has a bias towards a certain type of quarterback, which is potential, and all he sees is raw talent. I want to make this prediction now. Mel Kiper is going to fall. Mel Kiper has unfairly been critical of Hendon Hooker this year. He's going to fall in love with Joe Milton next year, and he's going to be wrong on that too. Because Joe Milton's going to be an overrated NFL draft prospect next year. Dave and I have talked about this. He sees Anthony Richardson in himself, and he should. He should. He can do everything Anthony Richardson can do, and he's in a better system. And Joe Milton does have amazing intangibles. He's one of the... You can't say enough about a guy that willingly accepted losing his starting job, although he would say he didn't lose it, he got hurt. But at the same time, you can't underestimate a guy willing to accept what happened and stay with the program and wait his turn. I think Joe Milton, there's a lot to be said about him. Mel Kiper only sees physical abilities. He's going to overrate Joe Milton next year. I don't see Joe Milton being the same NFL quarterback that Hendon Hooker was. So we're going to have to see how this plays out. But the real story of tonight's NFL draft is Darnell Wright going with the 10th pick to the Chicago Bears, and he's responsible for protecting Justin Fields. Hendon Hooker not getting drafted, but also Will Levis not getting drafted. And it's worthy of laughing about that. I used to not laugh about this stuff. You always kind of felt bad. I remember in 2013, Geno Smith waiting, and it was kind of hard to watch Geno Smith waiting to get drafted. The same with Aaron Rodgers in 2005. With NIL money and the arrogance of Will Levis himself, who has gone out of his way to carry himself like he's better than everybody else, who I think created a burner account on Reddit to up himself to trying to be a number one draft pick. Yeah, it's kind of funny that he wasn't drafted in the first round. It's kind of hilarious. Let's just be honest. Let's all laugh about that, okay? So we're going to talk more about this tomorrow. Thank you guys for tuning in. Dave and I are on at 10 a.m. Eastern time. We really, really, really appreciate you all tuning in for tonight. It was an improv show. Tennessee had the first round draft pick since 2017. They're sixth since the firing of the Fulmer era. Dan Williams, Eric Berry, Juwan James, Derek Barnett, and Cordell Patterson. You could count Robert Ayers, but he was drafted in 2009. Fulmer's last season was 2008, so I don't fully count him. All I will say is that Tennessee should be happy about the state of the program and where it's going. They just had a top 10 pick. That speaks volumes. It's their first top 10 pick since Eric Berry. They're going to be fine. We're going to talk about this more tomorrow. Thank you guys for tuning in with Off the Hook Sports. I am Caleb Calhoun. Dave will be back on tomorrow. He probably has better insight than me. He knows more football than me. He's been covering this longer than I have. But thank you guys all for tuning in tonight. It's been a late night. I'm not a fan of these NFL drafts, the first round going so long, but it was a lot of fun having you guys on with me. So we'll be back on tomorrow. Give me your thoughts then, 10 a.m. Eastern time. You guys all have a good one. With All the Hook Sports, this is